And number 10 is Sons of the Forest. I don't know what better to say than it's the forest, but much bigger and much better. It is a beautiful game, it is an atmospheric game. It is a game with many possibilities for building, and a crazy, weird story that may not shock you if you've been through the original forest. I mean, this game is still in early access. It's not necessarily a complete game yet, and it is beloved by pretty much everybody that plays it. And number 9 is the Outlast Trials. This is basically a prequel that takes place during the Cold War, where Murkov is doing some experiments. If you know anything about that, it's a very different setting from the first two, but the game itself actually, builds on a lot of the great ideas from Outlast. Essentially, you have quests or tasks, or whatever you want to call them. You gotta complete them while not getting killed. You don't really have any offensive weaponry of any kind. You do have some passive defense like mines, but it's a pretty unique series, and it's a pretty good entry into it. At number 8 is Dredge, a fishing game that somehow manages to be unsettling. Look at the art style. It's cartoony, it's a little bit whimsical, except the color palette is a little bit dingy. It's a game that kind of feels like several different types of games, but brings them together pretty well. It also manages to instill this sense of dread, that this type of game you wouldn't think would be able to. I really enjoy Dredge. It's a very different experience from what it looks like, and a very good one. At number 7 is Starfield. Yes, there are a lot of people who, do everything they can to discredit Starfield, and I know that there are more than enough people that will remember me saying a million times, wow, Bethesda needs to move to Unreal already. I'm so tired of the problems of the creation engine, but that doesn't mean Starfield is somehow absent of merit. It's actually a very good game, with a lot of interesting stuff, if you're willing to go into the Bethesda first for it. I saw an article on Forbes talking about Starfield, wanting to attempt a Cyberpunk 2077 reputation repair, and I don't really understand why it has to. I think it's got an extreme hate, in areas where maybe it should get mild hate. That isn't to say that Bethesda doesn't need to change and do better, but it's a Bethesda game. Do I have problems with it? Due to the nature of it being a Bethesda game? Absolutely. And I think that a Bethesda game needs to be something more going forward from Starfield, but I don't really consider Starfield an unmitigated disaster. It's a lot of interesting content, built in a pretty stagnant engine. As much as people hate it, there's actually a lot of great things to see in this game, and I will stand by that statement at very least. At number 6 is Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon, a game that does everything that it needs to do, and does it incredibly well. You got customization, you got a crazy futuristic story, you got the nonsense, but not quite the Kojima level of the nonsense. Armored Core 6 is really just a great game. I love this game. It also doesn't wear out its welcome. It's a 20-hour game. It's worth every cent, because it packs those 20 hours with everything. At number 5 is Robocop Rogue City, a game that I don't think that anybody expected would be among the best of the year, even with a cool demo. I know a lot of people, myself included, played that demo, like this is really fun, but if it doesn't have some kind of progression in it, it's not going to be enjoyable, and it does have progression in it. It kind of defied expectation in certain ways, being a fresh experience the whole way through. I love Robocop Rogue City. It is invincible tank man action. You're not actually invincible. You can't die, but it's definitely a power simulator. And man, is it ever fun. It's also the follow-up to Robocop. That probably should have happened and never did. At number 4 is Lies of P, the Pinocchio Souls-like. Yep, when you hear those words in 2022, you're kinda like, what? What the hell are we talking about here? But it is fantastic, and lying actually figures into the narrative. It's so weird that you could make a Pinocchio Souls-like that uses the source material in a way that complements the Souls-like elements, and it's just an all-around fantastic game. That's what this is, though. At number 3 is Alan Wake 2. This is, in my opinion, the best game of the year. Yes, I am going to mention 2 that are perhaps bigger, and have merit for others to say, maybe are the best games of the year. For me, it's number 3, though, Alan Wake 2. This is absolutely the height of what Remedy has decided a game should be. Control, fantastic. Introduces so many of the things that they take to extremes here, but they also take all of the stuff that they did on Alan Wake so well. Like, it's a game that crystallizes the experience and style of Remedy into an incredible experience that bursts out of every boundary you attempt to put it in. Scary, but it's a really good story that's complex and interesting and takes characterization to a new level. A lot of people say Saga Anderson is a Mary Sue. Well, she's the most interesting Mary Sue I have ever played in a game, if so. And also, in my opinion, has interesting implications in terms of Alan Wake's writing. If she is indeed a Mary Sue, it's a game where a statement like that actually makes sense to talk about. I don't know, I love Alan Wake too. What a game. And number 2 is Hogwarts Legacy, an open-world game in a franchise. Again, I don't care for it, but does it very well. It's a very competent, very enjoyable open-world Hogwarts. I don't love the wizarding world. I don't really enjoy Harry Potter, but I did really enjoy exploring Hogwarts in this game. And really, a lot of the world here is very cool to see. Just like Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, I actually think it is a game that, whether or not you are a fan of the IP, is a worthy game to play, because it's not going to set the world on fire or anything with its content, but it just is a really competent open-world game. And if you like open-world games, the ones that really do it well, even if they don't necessarily do anything new, are still a little few and far between. Like, there's a lot of open-world games. Just throw a bunch of shit at the wall to see what sticks. And Hogwarts Legacy is not one of those. It's a well-curated, well-paced, interesting story that makes good use of the open world. And finally, at number 1, it's Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know how you talk about Baldur's Gate 3 in an abbreviated manner. It is perhaps the most detailed, varied, and granular AAA game ever made. And it is a AAA game. There is some debate as to whether or not it is. It is. It's huge. It's insane. There's so much scale. It cost over $100 million to make. It's really a worthy follow-up to the original BioWare RPGs. But Larian also makes it their own by making it turn-based, and I think it really works. I actually think it might be my favorite of the 3 Baldur's Gate games.
Bow before me. Bow before the absolute. Bow!